Councilmember Resendez,
Here.
Councilmember Morales. Here. Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Vice Mayor Perez,
Here.
Mayor Velazquez.
Here.
City Manager Miller,
Here.
City Attorney Epperson,
Here.
Councilmember Resendez,
Here.
Chief of Police Reynoso.
Here.
Thank you. The posting of the agenda. The agenda for the City of Hollister City Council Special Meeting of May 14th, 2022 was posted on the bulletin board at City Hall on May 10th, 2022 at 11 a.m. per Government Code Section 54956.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to item A1.
Thank you. Item A1 is the question of we would like to place an advisory measure on the 2022 ballot in regards to the Hollister Independence Day rally. And the question we are proposing to place on the ballot would be, should the City of Hollister reestablish the Independence Day rally?
That it? I do have I have a question. So I'm absolutely in favor of having the public decide this, but my only concern is it binding or not binding? Because if we pass this, the voters pass this, and then the next year comes up and for some reason the council decides not to go through with it, then the public can be very upset that they voted on something where it didn't go through. So how does that hold together? What kind of position does that put us in? And either way, I'm going to support this. I just want to make sure we're clear and upfront with the public about it.
Our resolution would state the City Council desires to propose an advisory measure, the measure which would seek the voters' opinion as to whether the City of Hollister should reestablish the city's annual Independence Day rally. It, to my understanding, is just voter opinion regarding substantive issues, and it would not regarding the rally and would not be binding.
So I guess the question I'm asking though is, and I can understand that if something happens, I get it, but how do we let the public know that so it's very clear up front? Because of again, once voters vote on something, they feel like they vote on something and it's being ignored. That's really what gets people frustrated. I think it's all of us frustrated when we see these things happen. So is there announcements we put with this that, look, it's an advisory vote, it's not a requirement, just the advisory? How do we announce that if we were to pass it?
The resolution that I would bring before council to place this on the ballot would be titled, "A resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister, California, submitting to the qualified voters of the City of Hollister an advisory measure seeking voter opinion regarding the establishment of the city's Independence Day rally at a general municipal election to be consolidated with the statewide general election to be held November 8th, 2022, and setting rules for arguments and rebuttals for and against said measure."
Thank you. Mr. Burns, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm 100% in support, as are you. And I absolutely favor a advisory versus binary ballot measure. And as I understand it, and City Clerk, please clarify for me if I'm wrong here, but this council cannot advocate for or in opposition as a council member, but certainly as an individual, we could absolutely do that. And Mayor, I think part of what's incumbent here and imperative for me is that we actually physically go out and engage our council districts in the city at large, because there are so many misunderstandings. I mean, I will later get into some of my concerns, but I think it's incumbent upon us to educate the voters so that we get a clear picture. And I'm 100% in support of a advisory measure. I would never support a binary one because it creates the predicament that you've just expressed. And quite candidly, I would never vote in opposition to our chief of police. If our chief of police, regardless of whether it's him or her, or when they're there, I'm never going to contradict the subject matter expert on public safety. And so But I do think it's imperative that we understand, because this council has historically, as I understand it and as I recall it, this almost always comes down to a 3-2 one way or the other for a laundry list of different reasons. Most recently, because of public safety concerns. The previous year that I've been on council was because of health concerns. And we could never limit ourselves to not have that option to opt out. But I do agree with you that we have to educate the community, because there need to be certain understandings that we move forward. And I've never been more willing to go forward than I have this year in my personal and professional life. And so we need to educate our community so that they vote on the measure with an educated background, and then they'll choose either way. And that, I think that gives council a preliminary direction to move, unless there's a reason not to that could be clearly quantified and justified. And frankly, it still is going to leave it up to the council on a yearly basis. And it would be inappropriate for us to lock future councils into decisions that we choose to make in the near future, in my opinion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Resendez, did your hand, I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm definitely in support of getting it on the ballot. I'm glad that we're even considering it, and it looks like we probably are going to move forward. Would I like a legally binding one as opposed to an advisory one? 100%. I think that would take the politics out of it altogether, because that is what happens every year. Regardless of who comes up here and speaks, politics are involved, and every year, politics, in my opinion, slows the progress of us getting the biker rally going, of us helping our small business owners and our community to continue support a tradition that we're known for here. So I think we need to take it away from the council and put it in the hands of the voters 100%. And we will come together, I believe, with the resources, with police, with fire, to ensure that we have a safe, sound event every single year, if that were the case. However, I don't think that the majority of the council would support that at this time. So I'm glad, again, just to see it there. I know the opinion. We know what's going to happen. We know what they're going to say. And I do understand what the mayor is saying. And I heard you loud and clear, Christine. But I do think, regardless, that language is it can be a little bit confusing, and it's going to be confusing for the public, and they are going to get frustrated and upset by this process. It seems like it's a bit of a waste of the time, energy, and resources, but it's a start, and I'm willing to compromise and to go there for sure. So again, I'm very glad that the council is considering putting this on the ballot, regardless if it's legally binding or not. And I would 100% support having it be legally binding and taking this decision out of the council members' hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales?
So if it does go to the voters in November and it's advisory, it does cost the city to put it on the ballot. And again, I think the process in itself will be frustrating. And I don't support anything that has the inability for the city to move forward on issues, especially if we're not able to address many of the issues that we have for. I think the city council has to be more proactive in planning and being able to acquire the necessary resources a year in advance in order for things to happen. So I think I'd like to see a little bit more meat, because we can put anything on the ballot, and if it's advisory, people are still going to get frustrated. I think it's still on the city to be able to plan adequately for an event if we know all the different elements. So I'm in favor, but I think that the city council has to do a little bit or a lot more planning to make sure that 6 months in, 3 months in, or a year in, we know what we're going to need. We have that understanding, and then we determine either 6 months in advance whether things can happen or not, or even 3 months in advance. But it's still on the city to be able to do that, regardless of what happens with the ballot measure.
I think it's kind of a waste of money, but if it's something that needs to be done, I'm okay with that. I think that all the council here wants it. I think it always comes down to safety, and that's our as council, that's our first and foremost responsibility, is to ensure safety of our community. And so I will go with this, definitely on advisory. I don't think that there's so many moving parts behind this that to be in there with a binary, anything binding us to having to have this event. And if we can't ensure safety, we don't want to end up with I mean, could you imagine Gilroy, Garlic, if they didn't have adequate police to respond to that incident, how many more people would have been hurt? And yeah, you know what? We've never had a problem here, and either did Gilroy until that happened. So you know what? I'm in favor of let's do the rally. Let's it's like Dolores Morales said. It's like, you know, let's ensure our safety, and let's plan it ahead, and let's not wait till the last minute, because you know what? That's frustrating as a community, as a council. So I think it always comes back to us as a council that we need to be proactive into arranging all these different integral parts, especially the security. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want a clarification here, because not clarification, I want to make a statement. Nobody waited for the last minute. Matter of fact, we knew about this rally coming way ahead of time. It's not that the council waited to make a decision or anything else. It was very clear that we were going to move in this direction. Now, that public safety couldn't find additional staff, I get it. We went through this COVID and all these other nightmares. I get that, but it's not that anybody waited till last minute at all. That's not the issue. Issue is making sure we're having a clear path. I can understand why it can't be binding, but I just want to make sure, my point is making sure that the public understands that this vote is basically saying we support the rally, but if there is these circumstances, then these are reasons we can't. Example, promoter decides he doesn't want to do it anymore. If another promoter does not step up and pay the fees that are required, then it would be a bad choice for the city council to try to put on the rally. If we get credible threats of violence, that's obviously a reason not to do the rally. But overall, year after year, the problem has been, as Mr. Burns pointed out, 3-2, 2-3, back and forth. It's just, hey, look, we're for it. We're going to get out of the way of making it happen. We've had a good promoter ready to go. We just need to make sure that the public's with us on it, or they're not. And we go from there. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do. Peter Lago.
I'm a firm believer in the adage, never accept the answer no from somebody that can't say yes. So you're giving the opportunity for the public to say no, while even your yes can be vetoed by Chief Reynoso based on public safety. The measure misses the mark, because the reason why we've not been able to address this in a way that whether you vote on it or whether the people vote on it, it can still get vetoed because of public safety, because we've underfunded our police department. If the measure does not have a contingent built into it to provide Chief Reynoso with what he needs to where he feels comfortable doing it, then it's not going to work any way you do it. So if you want to put this up for public vote, the vote should be, what is the cost of providing the security from the police end of it, so that we can get the blessing of the police chief and he can feel comfortable moving forward on it? Because it doesn't matter whether you guys all unanimously vote for it. He can still say, I don't feel comfortable doing this. I don't have the resources to do this. The public can say the same thing, and he can still say, this doesn't make sense. I don't have the resources to be able to cover this. So unless we address his problem, which is coming up with the resources to where he feels comfortable doing this, then this is all just, it's a dog and pony show. It's taking the responsibility off of you guys to vote yes or vote no, when we really haven't addressed the real problem, which is public safety. So if public safety is the concern, how do we move forward while addressing that public safety in this measure where we vote and we say, here are the risks, here are the contingencies, and here's what it's going to take to be able to do this. And until we provide him with the resources that he needs, where he will give his blessing, then it's all for naught. Obviously, I'm for the rally. Obviously, I'm against creating human pens where everyone is bereft their guns, and then you have someone go in there and shoot everybody up because they know it's a place where there's no guns or anything like that. So security, be it armed citizens or be it the police, obviously needs to be addressed in any public situation moving forward, because we do have increased security risk with the whole thing that's going on right now. But until we address what the chief's concerns are and how to fund that so that he can come with actionable, here's the solution and here's how much it's going to cost, then we really aren't going to get anywhere with this. And no measure is going to solve that. So we have to counsel with the chief. We have to ask him what he needs. We have to figure out what it would take. And then only then with that can we move forward.
Thank you, sir.
I have no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So you're asking for direction from the council? Just go ahead, sir. Chief. Well, we'll let Mr. Resendez go on.
I think Mr. Lago brought up some valid points. I think that, yeah, that's what a little bit frustrating about this. Why are we going to put it on the ballot if it's like a complete waste of time, in my opinion? Why can we not consider making it binding with certain parameters and ask the police, as Mr. Lago said, what is it that you need? We can include that in the ballot measure, that we are going to essentially take it out of the hands of the council, put it in the hands of the voters, unless the police department does not meet A, B, and C, then that would allow us to not have the rally. Like, that's what's happening, right? And if we really want to address the issue, then let's work with the police department. Let's put it on the ballot, make sure it's legally binding, and certain parameters are not met by the police department, then that'll protect us legally, and then we won't be able to have it.
I'm not sure we can do a binding measure with exceptions.
Okay, so I guess that'd be a question for legal, but we don't have anybody here today. Do we have somebody? Oh,
Jason?
is he?
Not the first time I've been described as nobody, Councilmember Resendez. Listen, as I think everyone is aware, the purpose of this agenda item is simply to give direction to staff on how to proceed with this. So that's one of the types of questions, if the council wants staff to proceed, that would be answered as this is fleshed out moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Chief, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, and I think I agree with Councilmember Burns that there's a lot of misconceptions about this issue. I must say that every time we've had a rally here, the council that has been here has supported law enforcement. They have provided funding even in excess of what the money that's coming in. They have never shied away from paying for the security. The issue is being able to get the security, get those forces has been harder and harder every year, and especially on a holiday weekend. And one of the things that we've suggested is if it wasn't on the 4th of July, there's a possibility we could get more staff from other cities because it's coinciding with their events as well. So hopefully it doesn't say specifically, I know it says Independence Rally, but hopefully there's nothing specific that it has to be that weekend. That moving forward might be something that we can look forward to if the voters vote yes, that the council can decide in the future. But I just wanted to clarify that the city council has always funded the needs for public safety. That has never been an issue. And it's just being able to find that staff that's becoming the problem. So I just want to clarify that.
If I can ask you.
Thank you, Chief. And we could say motorcycle rally. We don't have to call it Independence Day rally.
No, we don't have to call it Independence Day rally or anything else because of issues we had with trademarks. But I do have a question for Chief. You know, I've been approached by several, those of you who don't know, we have a lot of law enforcement officers too that live here in our community. We're kind of, if you know, Southern California, that Simi Valley is a place in Southern California. Hollister is a place in Northern California. Chief, I've had some officers approach me and ask, you know, why can't we create a program, reserve program for some of these retired officers that would like to help the city, and they would be ready for these special events or even help in different areas for you, because a lot of them, they want to keep working. They're young. You know, I'm saying young because I'm almost going to hit 60 soon. They're younger than me, but they're retired. They want to go back out. But that's been a question. Maybe you could help us, not today, but talk about a program and see what we can do. And maybe that's our answer right here to get these things solved and help the community all year.
Well, just really quickly, Mr. Mayor, we do have a reserve program. There are requirements through post. Any reserve officer has to go through the background psychological evaluation. And then there's a commitment that they have to provide work every month, not just for a rally.
Right.
And that program's been in place for years. And we currently only have one full-time, one reserve officer.
Thank you.
And but that is available if anyone's interested.
I see Councilmember Burns volunteering because he used to.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead. Mr. Burns.
I do traffic control really well.
You had a comment, Mr. Burns?
Oh, I have several.
Okay.
So, first of all, in response to your comment, I thought that was an excellent idea. And I don't know if it still is in place, but as a younger man working in law enforcement, I also worked occasionally part-time for Stanford University for their large events. They would have the University of Texas come in and play Stanford in football, and they'd have 100,000 people crowd. And so Stanford certainly didn't have their resources on a daily basis to police those events. And so they called them Special Events Police, SEPs is what it was called in chief. I have to presume that that type of a program is still in place to some degree or another, and they only employed currently active law enforcement officers. So it wasn't really the retired folks, but it was a way for people to make money. And so there has to be a better way. There has to be a way. I would very much like to see us get to a position of yes. But again, I'm not open to compromising our community safety or our visitors and guest safety to hold an event. And so I have a couple of questions, and hopefully, Mr. Resendez, you'll be willing to respond to this for me. In your opening comments, you mentioned that the politics are always involved in this. Now, I've only been personally involved in this for two cycles now, and you indicated that you know the opinion, and you said you knew what people were going to say. And so one of my struggles has always been, I don't know that. And again, as a council, this vote has frequently gone 3-2 or 2-3. And so I do see the value to the ballot measure. I don't see it as a waste of money, because I don't think anybody on this council has been on council long enough to know the entire city's opinion, and particularly recognizing this community is growing and is continuing to grow. And maybe the mayor would be the closest, but I know in my district, I've got like 10,000 people, and I can't honestly speak for those 10,000 people in this regard. And maybe we find, our presumption is the community is supportive of it. And frankly, I hope they are. But the reality is I can't say that because I haven't talked to 10,000 people in District 4 to get their opinion. And yes, I've done doorbelling, I walked neighborhoods, I talk with people, I receive calls, but it's minuscule in the number of the people that reside in my district. And I certainly can't speak citywide. And so for me, I do see the value. And so maybe as I'm talking this through in my head, as I'm speaking it as well, maybe it's a rhetorical comment or question, and maybe you don't need to respond, but I would invite you to respond to those questions, because I haven't seen it. I do know on the 2 cycles, clearly last year's event was canceled because of COVID. There's no ifs, no ands, no doubts about it. But as I recall that, I think that was a 3-2 vote as well. And so at the end of the day, the simple majority sometimes has to take control and make difficult decisions. And sometimes they're not popular. And in this case, as our chief has expressed, thank you, Chief, this city council was willing to cut a check to get the resources. I mean, Chief, if I recall, you were talking about having to pay hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, just to bring CHP cars from Sacramento here to provide that resource. And this council was willing to authorize that. So at the end of the day, I really do think Mr. Lago's comments are most relevant, most germane. I am a little disappointed that we only had one person that showed up to speak on a special event, but the comments they hit home for me. And so I don't see this as a waste of money moving this forward. But, this rally, as I understand it, and as I recall it, some of the highlights for me were, and I'm not 100% sure this is fiction versus fact, but one year the rally promoter breached the contract and left the city, I want to say, I think it was $90,000 that they walked away from. And we never chose to pursue that, as I understand it. In one year, a vendor stole the logo for the city or used it without authorization, and that created a problem. In one year, two people after the rally that I'm not even convinced were directly associated with the rally, but I find it hard to believe they weren't, as guests, were shot at the Chevron gas station. 1 year we were told that if officers that were coming to work the rally were injured as a result of the rally, that the city would be on the hook for their workers' comp. And I understand that that's been resolved. And so that was always one of my sticking points, and that's no longer a sticking point. I've personally watched hours of tape from previous council discussions where it was always a conversation about liability and then public versus private property. And I think that's still an ongoing conversation. I mean, recently we've heard the county express maybe some interest in either co-participating or hosting an event at a park where you could have a more secured environment, where you could charge a fee, where you could provide a better line of service. I've also read in local papers that the reason the Gilroy Garlic Festival was canceled was a direct result of that active shooter that they had a couple of years ago. And as I understand it, they've got, I thought I read maybe 18 or 19 pending lawsuits against the city, because obviously the city has deep pockets. As I understand it, I've heard it said that this rally makes money for our community. We know that that's true, but we've never taken the time to really do the research to document it. And this council was previously committed to do that if this rally went forward this year. And that's a huge step forward, because there is an economic impact that this community definitely benefits from the rally. But we can't quantify that because previous councils, previous rallies, that never was done. We've heard that building permits and merchant permits were always undervalued. We've heard that sales tax was often not paid. There's a whole lot of challenges that happen, and Councilmember Morales hit the nail on the head. And she hit a grand slam, in my opinion. We need to do a better job of organizing this, and you can't wait until January to talk about a rally in July. This conversations need to start probably in August, if not, well, frankly, I think they're starting today, which I think is a very good thing to move forward. I'm concerned also, Mr. Epperson, as I understand it, we're under a 5-year contract with this current promoter. And so we will be entering the 4th year of a 5-year deal. I don't know if that makes sense to continue with that contract or just void it out and start fresh and new. I've heard the promoter say that really he needs a 3-year deal. Well, we're going 4 into 5, and he hasn't gotten a 1-year deal out of the deal so far. And so there are just so many uncertainties about this. And the other thing that I think this council has done recognizing this is we've created an ad hoc committee of Vice Mayor Perez and Council Member Morales to be involved in special events. And I think there's a true value to that. And so I think that the ballot would be helpful to really get the pulse of the community, because frankly, if they go no, well, in my mind, then we're done. But I don't want that to be the outcome, but I believe it's a possibility because nobody's ever really done the research to know whether it's even something this community is interested in and willing to support. And again, I think Mr. Lago hit the nail on the head. We really do need to know what the true costs for security are on this event. And as I recall, the earlier events were policed. I won't say they were over policed, but there was a high end dollar value for that service. And I know over years, the police department has worked tirelessly to reduce that number to try and really figure out what it is that we may be able to prevent problems and provide a safe event. And at the end of the day, our chief can do everything possible, and there's still no guarantee it's going to be a safe event. There is always going to be some risk to having an event. And I don't care whether it's the garlic festival. I don't care whether it's a flower festival. You can't necessarily control the outcomes, but we can certainly do our best. And so for me, again, I don't necessarily agree that this is a political thing. I have no political benefit from this, whether this happens or not. At the end of the day, I have an obligation, a duty, and a responsibility to ensure that as a council member, I vote according to my constituents' desires, which is part of the reason we're here today and part of the reason, again, to take the vote. But I also have a moral and ethical responsibility to ensure that if we're going to put an event on, that is absolutely as safe as possible. And I, Tim Burns, certainly cannot speak on behalf of modern day law enforcement, current law enforcement. The chief has access to information I don't have a need, a right, or an opportunity to know, and I would never ask the chief to provide that. But I have to trust in our chief of police. I have to trust in our fire department, our fire chief. I have to trust in the city manager. I'm not in the event business. And so ultimately, I'm going to trust in these people. And I promise you, it's got nothing to do with politics. I don't benefit. If anything, when I put out at the last council update that I did after this council voted not to, frankly, I got lit up for that. And I was willing to take one for Tim Burns because I had at least had the nerve to put out why my thoughts were. I didn't just simply put it out there. The council voted 3-2 no, and that's it. And that was honest. It was factual, but it wasn't complete. And I'm willing to take a hit when I vote a certain way, and I will take the scrutiny. I will take the challenge. But politics have nothing to do with this, in my opinion. And I've looked at other council tapes where council members have struggled as we are now. And I've never seen the politics in it. So I would love to know what that really means and how it could be quantified, because I don't think this is a political thing. I think that this is something that we are put on the dais to make hard decisions that not everybody's always going to like or support. And I don't know. I don't think anybody on this council has the knowledge that this chief of police sitting next to me or previous chiefs knew. And so for me to hear that it's political, frankly, it offends me a little bit. So my 2 cents. Thank you, Mayor, for the time.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Resendez.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chief of Police, the program that we're talking about with the reserves, I would imagine that we came up or you came up with them, the requirement of them having to be here once a month to work. Is that correct?
No, there's a post requirement, California. It's the same throughout the whole state.
Okay, so that was my question. So I want to stay focused on solutions here. I don't want to get back in this back and forth. That's not what I'm here for. So I'm wondering, what can we do to ensure that all of the problems that were brought up over the years, since I've been here in person watching for years and years and years, are not going to come up, and we stay focused on the solution here? So what would it take for us to get to that? I understand this year was a bit of a unique year. There's a shortage everywhere, but I do think the mayor brought up a good point. And if we can find a way to tap into that resource of the police officers here in our community, not just for the rally, but in any time that there's an emergency, that's a huge concern of our constituents. And then the other thing is, I'm not entirely in favor of moving it from the 4th of July weekend. I'll be honest with you. I think it's a longstanding tradition. I think people look forward to that. And I think that two things, if we keep starting it or saying we're going to do it and then we don't, saying we're going to do it, we don't, it's hurting the rally. Like, that's what's happening. It's hurting the economy here. It's hurting our local businesses. It's hurting our community. That's what's happening. And if you talk to your constituents who we're up here to represent and make decisions for, you would know that. So I'm wondering, what can we do to keep it on the 4th of July weekend? And what can we do to ensure that it is going to take place?
In regards to the reserve program, it's a longstanding, it's been open, and we've known that there's a lot of police officers who live here, who work somewhere else. It would be great to tap into that resource, not just for the rally, but all the time. And it's just, there is no interest because of the requirements that have been put on reserve officers going back, I believe now 10 years. You have to do so much just to be a reserve. And even though we do pay our reserves here an hourly rate, it's just not We just haven't had any applicants for that. And it goes the same through other departments are having the same issues. As far as what the solution is, the moving it from the 4th of July would just make things possibly easier. If you're not going to do it, it's just increasingly harder. The issue that was resolved with the city not paying for the workman's comp issue, that's been resolved for the city of Hollister. It's complicated us getting help from other cities because now they're saying, why should I send you our officers? And if they get hurt, I have to pay for their workman's comp. So that's created another problem. The staffing issue is across the state. We just had, we still have openings. We're struggling to hire people. Every city is in the same boat with us. So when we're asking them on a busy holiday weekend, can you send us officers? The answer is increasingly, no, we can't. Even if they wanted to, they can't. So I don't know how to solve that issue because when we do these events, we're asking other people for help. And if they say no, or they can't, or they won't, I don't know what we can do. We're already paying them their overtime rate. We're reimbursing them. And some of them even have higher rates that the city, the employee is not making that money. The city's actually benefiting. Some cities have those rates already in place and we're willing to pay that. So even with that in place, they're still saying no, they're not available for us. So I don't know how to answer that question when it's in the hands of other police departments to help us or not.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering now that you've given me that information that we don't necessarily keep them here as on our reserves. Why don't we find out unofficially how many police officers live here? I wonder if we can get like a survey out and if we can build a database. And then at that point, we can start coordinating with their police departments and find out if they're willing, since they live here, to work the event. So they're not necessarily here as a reserve officer, but if we can find out if they're here and if they're interested in working and they're not working for their PD, maybe that's a better way of going about it, I would say.
I think that would be circumventing a lot of post requirements. And we essentially have that now. We have a lot of officers, let's say from San Jose PD. We've already asked, when we asked everyone for help, it included San Jose PD. There was no desire or anything for them to pass on. There is liability on their part as well. If their officers are working our city and there's a shooting or something tragic happens, and you mentioned deep pockets, it's not just the deep pockets of Hollister, it would be the deep pockets of that city that provided that officer to provide those services. So that's something else that they take in consideration, even though they have, when we've had officers. So the issue has never been the officers willing to come to Hollister. We've had an agency, I'm not going to say the name of it, but we had teams of them coming here and they loved coming here to the point where they wouldn't even volunteer or sign up for the overtime in their city for the special events. So their captain stopped the authorization for them to come over here. The officers, the line staff want to come and help. It's the administration that makes this decision that they can't for whatever reason, because they don't have enough staffing, because they don't want the liability, because they don't want to risk someone getting hurt. Whatever the reason is, they're the ones that are saying no. So I would, if we had a database, it's in the hundreds and hundreds of people who live here who are law enforcement and work in other communities. We've always known that. But I don't know, creating a database for that could create additional problems and moving forward and not get the solution that we're looking for, because it still has to go through their administration for approval and their city for approval to help us.
Thank you, sir. I do have, oh, go ahead.
So I think the question before the council today is, are we going to have an advisory ballot measure in November to get a pulse in the community about the rally? So that's the question. I think we're going into problem solving mode, and we have a committee that was with 2 council members to be able to do that and actually plan. The police chief just jumped on the opportunity to be involved as part of that committee. So thank you, chief. That was a joke, but. And we're looking forward to problem solving.
Second time I've seen you joke. Sorry, I didn't pick up on it.
And, that committee can definitely problem solve a lot of the questions. So I don't want to get into, answering and providing information on post requirements or privacy for law enforcement officers. many levels of privacy because of the type of work that they do. It's a lot of time to educate the council members on post requirements here. So I recommend that the committee that's designated to be able to do that, if they, we can handle a lot of that and bring that back to this committee. I think the question before us today is, do we want to move forward on the ballot measure as an advisory measure? And I think that's the question before us today. So I think that's what we should be focusing on.
Thank you. I have to say, I think the conversation is important that I heard from Mr. Burns, Mr. Resendez, from everyone here today, because there is a history to this. And for the public to vote on this, they need to know the facts of the past, because there's misinformation out there that keeps coming back up and around, which sways. And I don't think today it's political, Mr. Burns. I think in the past it kind of was, but I take you for your word, everyone here for the word. But there's important pieces to know. I think the Garlic Festival, people make reference to in our community. Sometimes they'll say things like, well, we're so stupid. Garlic Festival makes tons of money. Well, it turns out they weren't making tons of money. Turns out they've been losing money for 10 years before the shooting ever happened. So there's issues with all events. What I'm excited about today is what I heard from our chief, that we do have the program where some retired officers in our community can be participating. We just have to make that work to bring them in, because I think, rally or not, it's beneficial to our community to have them active, and I think they'd be proud of that. Past history, the conversation about sales tax, we're not getting sales tax, that's just not correct. And I've said this for years. Has there ever been a few vendors that didn't report their sales tax? Of course. That's not where the big money comes from. The big money comes from all the people coming to town, shopping, eating at restaurants, buying gas, doing all kinds of, staying at hotels. This is why for years and years I asked to have a study done. I don't think previous councilors really understood the importance of it. I do believe this council understands that, because it's not about the sales tax that we think is coming in here. It's about the money that keeps churning through our community, and the cycles, I think 7 or 8 times those dollars go around. So it's important to have a professional study done, so people don't just say, oh, you just made that up. That's not true. We need factual information, because when we find that an event brings in money, we're more likely to say, well, let's keep moving on this. If we find it's losing money, we're all going to say the same thing. We don't need the headache. Why do this? So that's important. Past history. I hear the story of, we had a promoter that ran out of town without paying the bill. No, he ended up paying his bill. He ended up paying the bill. So that's really important factual information. And I know some people want to say, well, no, that's not what happened. It is what happened. They paid their bill. We knocked them on the head a few times, but they ended up paying their bill. It was frustrating, and it was a communication issue that it happened there. We had a trademark issue one time where a promoter decided, hey, this is a gold mine for myself, so I'm going to trademark this name to myself without telling anybody. Well, he was promptly kicked out of here from promoting. Wasn't such a wise move on his part. So we've solved these issues. We have a promoter now that is very good. And the conversation about we need to get in early and plan and work this is what the promoters do. They take the responsibility, so the burden is not on to the city. And this promoter has been very good at doing that. What we need to do is what was mentioned earlier, support the chief to make sure he has the backup that he needs in time. That's really it. That's really our role in this rally, because the promoters, that's how they're making their money. The last thing they need is for us to come back and forth and tell them what they're doing wrong or what they're doing right. They're professionals. It's working great. So our focus, if we're going to move forward, is really working with the chief, really working with the reserve program that is existing out there to enhance that, get more officers involved. Again, whether there's a rally or not, we have them ready. They're helping our officers do other things to the community. I think most of them would love knowing they only have to work 1 day a week, 1 day a month, actually. So I think they're all fine with that. But let's find out. We might find out they're not interested in it anymore. They are done. we don't know, but it's, I'm glad to hear there's a good conversation going on. But I want to get facts out there. So if there's other information that's rumors that we're still talking about, we need to clear them up. We need to put it into that, because this is what our community suffers the most from, is false information that gets spread around through the community. You had one more comment, sir?
Quick question.
Yeah.
Have we reached out to the sheriff's department or considered an MOU with them in the past or even this recent rally?
Yes, every year we've reached out, with the exception of this current sheriff. We've always been no assistance in the past. There's been a couple of years where we've had a one or two deputies that have been allowed to work with us, but I know that this sheriff is willing to speak about it and work with us. He was when the discussion was going forward. So we've done that all multiple times in the past.
Okay, so previous sheriff we have, but this current sheriff we have not, is what you're saying, but he's willing to have the conversation?
Yes, this
Very
sheriff
nice.
was willing to have a conversation, and if it was going forward, he did want to cooperate with us, Sheriff Taylor. But previous to him, we didn't have that, because the reasoning for them was all these people coming into our community, they're understaffed as well, and they had to provide security for San Juan Bautista and the outlying areas of the county, and Mulatto Park and other areas. So they weren't able to assist us back then. But this sheriff did indicate that he is willing to work with us and see what he can do. What didn't go past that conversation.
Thank you. And I want to say this is important, and I appreciate all the answers that you're giving to us, because I think we need to stay focused on solutions here. So I'm hopeful that that we are going to put it on the ballot, whether it's binding or not. And I'm hopeful that moving forward, we can collaborate to ensure that our police officers are representing us and that we've got partners. And it's disappointing that the previous sheriff wasn't willing to collaborate with us, but I'm glad that the current one is. So I'd like to see that, because they're here in our own town. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Perez.
So Chief, when you were talking about they have to do work one day a month, maybe we can kind of incorporate something like, because we usually have one event downtown a month, if we can get the applicants, I see that's the challenge right there. But maybe that's an idea to work in there. And you know what, it is an Independence Day rally, which is July 4th. Everyone knows that. But you know what, I think there's a give and take situation here. You know what? We are running against a big wall because of that date. Yes, it's tradition, but it's like, are we willing to not have it on a different day just because it's tradition? I mean, sometimes I have to change my vacation days because you know what? My tradition is second week of July. I'm Lake Tolek, I'm there. But you know what? I might have to change my date, even though it's a tradition. The August 6th is the anniversary date of Hollister. And just real quick, 150 is looking really good. It's going to be a nice event. The quick plug. But you know what? And so I understand the traditional part of having it on July 4th. But what about having it on August 6th? Yes. And we also go from a 3-day weekend to a 2-day weekend. But is something better than nothing? It's something to, I don't know. I think that this is what is it? 16 to $26,000 question is how many people what we're here to vote on is to see whether or not the majority is voting for, wants the rally or not. You know what? I think from my position, it's not really a waste of money. The money that the $16,000 to $26,000 is just to find out whether everybody wants, more people want it or not. And you know what? The council wants it. And there's a large portion of the community that wants it. It's going to be interesting that we're paying this much money just to find out, which I'm not opposed to. But you know what? It's I'd like for people to be a little bit flexible. You know, and if we can't have it on July 4th, does that mean no, we won't have it at all? Or can we have a Hollister rally and take out the independents? You know, That's another question. I don't know if that's something we should maybe put on the ballot. You know, are we interested in having it on a different date where we can ensure our security, but we can't ensure the safety, of course. That's always going to happen. I mean, it's always a chance, but these are questions that I think that we're going to be addressing on our festival committee, our events committee. Do we have options? Are we going to be stubborn and say July 4th or nothing? Or are we going to be flexible? So anyways, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Just because it's an independence rally, as I understand it, and just because July 4th is Independence Day, doesn't necessarily mean that the rally falls on that day anyway. When the rally's on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, it's not on July 4th. And so I think there naturally is going to be some flexibility in that regard. And yeah, would it be nice? Absolutely. The other thing I think that's really important for this council and the community to recognize, whether it be our police department or our county sheriff's department, they're also responsible for providing police services as they routinely do as well. And when it falls on a holiday, typically calls for service are increased, and the magnitude of those calls can be significantly higher. And so our police department specifically, they're still providing routine services to our community during that time, and they have limited resources. And as I understand it, the sheriff's department has even less resources, and they have a geographic region of an entire county. And when they get a call that's 30 miles south of here, they can't say, sorry, we're at the rally, we can't come necessarily, or we're going to be there, but we'll see you tomorrow. And so I think it's a very big issue. And so I just wanted to point that out. And then the final thing, I'd like to make a motion to reopen public hearing on this for public comment. So I saw, again, Mr. Lago, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I just am disappointed others didn't choose to come to the meeting today, but I would like to open it up. I did see his hand go up, and I would like to hear some more comments from him. He took the time out of his day to be here, and we took the time out of our day to be here to hear people like him. So I would like to make that motion if that's necessary.
No, it's not, it's just consensus if you guys want to reopen. Did you have a comment?
Perfect.
So thank you, Mr. Burns. I appreciate that. So if going back to the question about putting it on the ballot, if the council is interested in knowing, because it sounds like we need a lot more information from our community, whether they support the rally, the date, the safety. So it sounds like a lot of information. And I'm wondering if the council or if the city has ever done polling on issues like this. So instead of a ballot measure which says yes or no, then if we do something different, like polling or something else that actually gets us a lot more information in terms of what they're looking for, what does this mean, and do you support it, would you participate? We can incorporate whether people, want to be able to join a reserve. I know the 49ers has a program for active law enforcement officers when they have events at the Niner Stadium. So just something to consider. So those were all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go back to public comments.
Peter Lago.
Thank you for letting me speak again. I appreciate it. The concept of there being a bike week has been something that's been thrown around for a while. And if it alleviates the concern that the chief has, because there's a lot of overtime involved because it's a holiday weekend, a lot of these guys want to spend time with their families. And then the city itself also turns into World War III, and they've got their hands full with domestic violence, people blowing their fingers off and setting their houses on fire and everything like that. So I completely agree with the police chief that staffing during that particular time is particularly difficult. So if we did have something like a bike week that we could run up against, because Laguna Seca is running King of the Baggers at that time. And we've been doing this Hollister, it's all about the ride thing for about the last 3-4 years, trying to get people to go out on a ride, go somewhere and come back, so that we don't have that powder keg kind of thing that is our basic public concern with things like the Gilroy Garlic Festival and things that the police chief is concerned with, too many people in one place causing a problem. if there's a way to mitigate this, that does exist in creating a Hollister Bike Week, where we also include Laguna Seca and places where they can go off in that direction, they can have a good time and then come back into town. And then we can also work with having all of our local businesses tailor to and take the front of their shop, put up a curtain, and then have somebody that wants to sell t-shirts or something like that. So even if like you sell candles, for instance, and you're thinking that you're not going to sell that many candles during this particular thing, or you sell snow cones or whatever, you can invite some of those brick and mortar businesses to have some involvement with some of the bike related stuff for an entire week instead of just for a day or two. They can make money off of it. That's taxable revenue that we can then create a metric for, and then we can keep a lot of that money in the community. The other thing that I've been trying to get for a really long time is all the nonprofits related with selling water, Gatorade, and soda, because you can fund all the after school programs. You can fund a lot of the other stuff that's going on. With that said, I'm not opposed, and I can only speak for myself, in creating something like a bike week on an off weekend that's around when we do Laguna Seca, so that we can have a stretched out crowd of people that just come and visit the town, but not necessarily that powder keg that the chief and other people that are in the law enforcement community are concerned with, because it has been issues in the last 10 years. So if there's anything else you guys want to ask me, I'm right here and I got 40 seconds left.
What week is that? What'd you call it?
It's pretty much the week after 4th of July. So it does provide us the opportunity to be within the same time frame and allow us to just have people come in without necessarily killing the 75-year history that's here, and with respect to what the chief has to deal with in terms of people being on overtime, because it's basically double time and a half because they're on vacation and they're in overtime and everything like that. It's a tall order for him to fill.
Question for Tina. I don't know if I can ask her a question. Since you're here, you came up with a list of other events that were happening around this time. Do you remember what they were? Or do I have it?
Not sure if I'm going to say it right, but it's the classic car show in Monterey Pacific Grove. Concierge something. Yeah. So that was around this time. They recently canceled the Gilroy Garlic Festival, and there was one more that around August 6th maybe it's in Reno, Peter. It's a motorcycle event. Hot August nights. Yeah. Hot August nights. So we're kind of looking at July 9th looked like a day that was open community wide within our surrounding counties. I shouldn't say July 9th. It would have been July 9th this year, but the second weekend in July would kind of be open if we were to just call it a biker rally instead of the Independence Rally.
And these are all questions and issues that we plan to address in our events. I don't know what our committee's name is, but these things, and this is great because we're coming up with solutions and ideas and alternatives. This is what it's really about. So, but it is going to be interesting, and I will vote yes to get the opinion of the residents. That's all I have.
I have two more public comments.
Oh, okay. Well, let's finish up the public comments.
Mia Casey.
Hi, can you hear me now? Good morning. Thank you for opening the comment back up. I got up to get a cup of coffee. I thought there'd be a lot of people speaking, and I came back and it was closed. So thank you for opening it up again. And I appreciate all of the conversation that's happening around. I've learned a lot from our chief of police and Tim Burns. I appreciate all your knowledge on the subject. I think that it could be valuable to have an advisory vote. I'm not sure. I would want to see a lot of information presented, not just, hey guys, want to have a party, but what has the city earned as far as, how has it been successful? Seems like we've not been able to quantify it. I've seen a few articles in papers where the numbers weren't as positive as I would have hoped they would have been. And of course, that is issue of security. I think people need to understand that. I don't think people can just give it a vote and say, yeah, we want this without understanding the cost to the city. So I did like Councilmember Morales's idea of doing some focus, polling and stuff to really get a pulse of people, because I don't think anyone really has an idea of what the greater community wants. I think there is strong support. I've loved the rally and enjoyed it in the past, but I know safety and security has become an increasing issue, and the costs surrounding it. I appreciate our chiefs, giving us that information about, the workers' compensation issues and, trying to get the support. And I would agree too about the, one of my comments was going to be about moving it off of the 4th of July weekend, because we all know how crazy it gets with the fireworks and illegal fireworks, and people are running all over. So I can imagine how stretched the police and the sheriff's office are. So anyways, I really appreciate the conversation. I'm glad there's a committee around events. I think we could do more. And so I'm glad to see that. And I guess just thank you for the opportunity to speak.
John Casey.
Hi, I'm John Casey. I'm a resident of Hollister. I'm also in favor of the rally, but I don't think it should be a mandated vote to force it. I just think there's too many variables. I think this will be both, kind of an advisory vote and a pulse vote to kind of see what the public wants. I also think we ought to look at moving it off the July 4th date. August 6th to Councilmember Perez's idea seemed to make a lot of sense, but I also like the idea of the other speaker talking about tying it into another biker event. That seems to make some sense and at least gets us a week away. I also agree with the mayor. We need to get all the data to understand the revenues and the expenses, so we kind of know. I know, we've left out a lot of things in terms of revenue with the increase to the stores and things like that, and understanding what that means against the expenses. Nighttime 4th of July is pretty crazy in the neighborhoods. I think someone said, World War III going on. So I really think the chief of police needs to feel confident he has the resources to protect the public in the event where he's got his hands full on the 4th of July as well. And I do think there have been situations. I don't want anything to get out of hand in with the public. I mean, if you're members of the public, you're home and you're staying in your home, or you're outside, right there doing your fireworks and things like that. You're not out venturing around. So there is a definitely different element at night when you're out on July 4th when the rally's been held. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Burns, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I have a question for the city clerk, but I'd like to ask the city attorney first. Mr. Epperson, I see you, even though I can't see you, and I know you exist. And so we currently have an active contract, as I understand it, with the promoter. And as I understand it, it's got 2 years left. And I'm curious how we're contractually obligated and bound. And that's a part of the conversation that's missing today that I think is important too, particularly if we're contractually obligated to this gentleman. And so I'd like your thoughts and comments on that, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. My understanding, and I do not have that contract here in front of me, was that he had at least tentatively agreed that the contract would be altered, or if it was going to move forward, and that those alterations did not take place. So assuming that's the case, and I can go back and review all those communications, assuming that's the case, we would not currently be under an enforceable contract. But I do believe you're correct that if that contract is current and is enforceable, there would be 2 years remaining on it. I believe we'd be entering the 3rd year, perhaps the 4th year of that contract.
Thank you, sir. I look forward to your research on that, because again, I think that's going to help to drive the direction. And frankly, even if we went forward with the traditional rally next year, there is some benefit to that, I see, because we could actually do an economic impact study and review and really have better numbers. So, and thank you, Mr. Epperson. And Ms. Black, one of the things that I really like that I had never ever considered, and thank you, Councilmember Morales, would be a focus polling. And as I understand it, to put this on the ballot could cost us $16,000 or more. And so I'm wondering if this council has an appetite and a will to maybe delay a direction to look at what the cost would be for focus polling, because at the end of the day, I just want the best vehicle and the most information. And so I've never been involved. I haven't got a clue what it would cost to do that. And I don't know how, if one is better than the other. But for me, maybe it doesn't make sense to ask for that option or that alternative. But for me, I would like to maybe ask this council to delay for 2 weeks to make this decision, unless it's time sensitive and critical to that point where we have to make a decision now. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Resendez.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of doing a focus polling. We only had one person show up in person here. And it's just really challenging. People are going to go out and vote for the general election. That's just a given. And I think after hearing everybody speak up here on the dais and all of the public, I think that we should just move forward with an advisory, and then all of the details as far as moving it, staffing, everything else is doing a study to find out if it's economically beneficial. That's going to be worked out with the future council, in my opinion. But as of right now, I think the best avenue to take is just to get it on the general election for an advisory ballot and keep it very general, not too specific. That would be my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Several new comments I have. We've heard a lot of different things again, and that's why I say facts are important. We heard bad numbers, and again, garbage in, garbage out. In business, you have to be factual on what you're doing. Otherwise, you're not going to be there very long. We can't rely on our rumors or misinformation. This is why we need a professional firm. That's what they do. They're professionals in it. And this is why that's going to play a very important role in the future of this rally. And quite frankly, had it been done years ago when we were trying to get it done, we would not even be having this conversation, because we would have found out right then and there, it's a loser or this is a winner, and it's done. We've heard those conversations about workman's comp. Well, workman's comp conversation I've expressed for years and years, and we finally got the answer. And if you've been in business, you know how workman's comp really works. And that's exactly what ended up happening. It wasn't what was being rumored about. And Mr. Logan, thank you for being here, has talked about the bike week. This is something that's been a conversation for years in our community as far as organizing this rally, because there's a conversation happening now about, can we just change the date? Is it a big deal as far as the 4th of July? The big deal about the 4th of July, of course, there's history tied to it, but the big deal was it was a 3-day weekend that people were planning to take the weekend to come to Hollister and enjoy several days. When this rally first got going again, that is what made it so popular, because people were coming out, they were camping out, they really dedicated to it. That point is when the conversation started happening of, if this was a week-long event, this would probably be one of the biggest rallies in the country. There wasn't a lot of support at the time for a week-long event. Could it be shifted to another week, a week later with Bike Week, as was mentioned? That is something that the promoters dream about, having it tied in with the Bike Week, and you have a whole week, and you have people coming from Monterey, taking the rides and doing all the things that really make it a experience where they plan their vacation. I plan my summer road trip. This year it's Alaska, but I plan it. Every other family that does this plans for their trip. That week would be one of those weeks here. So what I'm actually hearing from this conversation, thank you again, Mr. Like, for bringing it up, is maybe the question should not be just the rally on the 4th of July, but would the public be more in favor of a bike week? Because 1 week and 2 days, it's not going to work. Promoters aren't interested. They know the numbers. It becomes a show where people come in for the day and they come in and they leave. Not a lot of benefit to it. When people have to stay in the hotels, that's when the big money hits, because of more. You wake up, you got to go have breakfast, you got to have lunch, you got to have dinner, you got to go back to your hotel, you're going to go get entertainment. Whereas bikers used to tell me, look, I have $500 in my pocket and I'm not leaving until every penny's gone. Where do I go spend it? That's the mentality of a lot of them. It's just to have a good time and relax. So you want to have a highly successful event, you go towards a bike week. if you want to do what we're doing, you do need a 3-day event. So I'm questioning now, do we want to be asking that question? Because if you shift it to a week later, it turns into what promoters have been asking for quite a while. How do we tie it in with everything going on in Monterey, for goodness sake? Because even those guys, they don't want everybody there, only there. They want, as Mr. Lago pointed out, the pressure relief valve going on. They want to go for the rides all over. They want to go to Big Sur. They want to come down. They want to go to Pinnacles. They want to go have a good time. So we need to understand the bigger question, because that really is the part that changes everything. And if we can get to that point, it's not, again, the 4th of July. That was only because it was a 3-day weekend. And of course, history is made. You shift by a week, that is still very acceptable to the riders that do come out. They just want to know they're going to come out to an event that's going to stay around and they can enjoy for a while in camp and do all the other things.
Real quick,
City
yeah,
Manager.
Mayor, and Peter probably can verify, because I haven't been at Daytona, but grew up with motorcycles in my past, is that Daytona week, what makes it successful, it has other motorcycle events, which we do have Hollister Hills, which could hold numerous events. So it could be a regional area where you do start with some other motorcycle events and then switch over to Laguna Seca the weekend afterwards.
Absolutely. And this then starts to incorporate San Juan Bautista, the county, everyone, this whole county benefits, and Monterey County. We're kind of sharing resources, what we're really doing. So this is a approach that if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about it, put it on the table and have a bigger conversation. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree 100% with you. I would like to hear our special events committee maybe push this concept forward further. That's the exact reason we created it. But I'd also like to hear what our chief of police's thoughts are, because now we're talking something really different, more prolonged, but probably less direct and voluminous. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounded good. And for me, again, it's about public safety, but I really would embrace that idea and support it 100%, assuming our chief feels that it's something that's achievable. And then you get our special events committee to help develop what this is going to be. I mean, I think that this connects all the pieces from the private sector to the public sector to multi-jurisdictional. I mean, I don't know what's Monterey County think about this. What does Laguna Seca think about it? I just see this as becoming more of a regional event. And I think it becomes a better event. And I think from what I've heard you say, our promoter would probably embrace it as well. And I just think this is a much better, well thought out outcome. And so I'd like to just hear what our chief's thoughts are in regard to this, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Chief first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would depend on what it looks like. If we're struggling to find coverage for 3 days and now you're making it 5 days, they'll just increase it to 2 days. There's a possibility that the events aren't happening here in Hollister for the 5 days. And so that would be so then we're only requiring staffing for 3 days, but we would have to have more staffing, maybe reduced for the remainder days, because even if the events are at Hollister Hills, they're going to be here. If they're going to be in Laguna Seca and Monterey, they're probably going to be over there, but few of them will show up here. So it's something that we'll be willing to work with the ad hoc committee. And if the city council decides to move forward with something like that, we would try to provide as much as we can. Not being on the 4th of July weekend, as I mentioned before, can be a good step towards getting the coverage that we would require. So that's a good thing. But we're willing to work with the council and anyone who will be working to have an event like this. Spoke with Mr. Lago before about his ideas. I think that I expressed to him that was a good idea to spread it around the region and not just in Hollister. That would be a good idea.
Mr. Resendez, you have a comment?
1,000,000% in support of that idea. It's going to bring so much revenue. It's going to prolong it. Sturgis is 2 weeks long, is my understanding. Daytona is 1 week long. I think that we have a real opportunity to bond or form partnerships with some of the regions nearby. The state parks You can even do something at Pinnacles, Bellotto. There's so much we can do. San Juan Bautista. I think it's a wonderful idea. And I do think that it will help with like the bottleneck is what we're looking at, or the high impact it's causing our public service officers. So yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think that moving it to the week after would be good, or the week before would help again, for the same reason that that we're not just doing it all in one weekend. So I would, though, encourage this council to make a decision today. I would like for us to put it on the ballot as an advisory and consider doing it for a week, one weekend, whatever it may be. But I think, yeah, I'm definitely in favor of doing a whole week. Thanks.
Mr. Lago, if I can ask you a question. One of the reasons this was brought up is the industry is changing between the different types of bikes. And that's where the bike week came in. It's a different, very fast growing segment of the motorcycle industry. What are those bikes named? I forgot.
Adventure bikes.
Adventure bikes. Okay. And this is where, again, it brings in a whole different crowd, a different mix. It takes away the pressure point of just one stuffed in weekend. Early on, when this rally first started, there was camping sites along Shore Road. A lot of that were packed with people. So you had a flow of people rather than just kind of like that pressure cooker.
Hence the phrase eco-tourists. There's a lot of people that are traveling in smaller vehicles now.
So yeah. I think, again, I don't know how to put this onto a ballot measure now, but I appreciate council members bringing this up and you bringing this up. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. If we're going to move forward, if not, what is the point?
If I may, getting a comprehensive breakdown from the police chief as to what his needs would be instrumental to being able to move forward with that package. Finding out if he needs X, Y, Z in order to be able to do this, then we know that if he's given X amount of budget, X amount of time to be able to do it, then he will give a blessing based on if these parameters are met. So if we know exactly what his parameters are so that they can be met, then we could put it on a ballot. Anything else is just kind of, well, we really want to have this, but we can't because of public safety. So.
I agree. Go ahead, sir.
Again, I think, I don't know if I'm going to put words in your mouth, chief, but it's going to depend on what it looks like. So I think that's where the ad hoc committee is instrumental for this bike week. I'd like to get, it's basically, I think this is great. You know what, if we go forward and we get it, put this on a ballot and we find out, you know what, not even ever 50 plus one don't want it. What are we going to do? Cancel everything? Because we keep thinking about, oh, everyone's going to go for it. And you know what? Hopefully they do. Are we looking at this other aspect? So what if, what? So my point is that let's find out, let's take it one step at a time. Let's find out what our residents want. Do they even want a bike rally? Okay. Yes. Okay. Now, maybe that's a good time to come out with a poll and say, hey, do you guys want a biker rally? Because I don't know if we can put this on the ballot. Do you want it for a week? I don't know the options, how you can put that. But I think we need to, if we're going to tackle this, we got to go step by step. So do our citizens want it? The council pretty much wants it. We support it. We're willing to fund it. So it's like, how much buy-in do we have from the community? Because you know what, it is kind of disappointing. This is such a big issue for our city, and look how many people showed up, and that's disappointing. So it's, how do we get this information?
We could ask the question, and on the ballot, it will say advisory vote only, so that they will be aware it's advisory. We could say, should the city of Hollister reestablish the Independence Day rally? Yes or no, and have an additional question, 1 week, 1 day. Biker, maybe something like that. Jason, I think that's something we can do. Just add another question on there and have, or maybe be it a choice, are you in favor of a bike week or just the 3-day
And that's correct. Those are all options that can be explored.
And the deadline to submit to the county ROV is June 20th. So we are creeping up on a deadline.
The only question, Ms. Burns, did you have a comment?
No, Mayor, I was just going to make a motion to move forward is what my recommendation and motion would be, sir.
I just want to get a clarification.
Would that be with the amendment to add a bike?
Yes, absolutely.
The only question I would have on that, and I think would be important, because you have the bike week, what you're doing, you're shifting it out of the 4th to the following week, which is really important part of this whole puzzle that we're having. But if you're not having the bike week, you're only doing what we've been doing, then it pretty much has to stay on that 3-day weekend, because that's how the people take the time off. And that's
So Mayor, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to my motion. So the motion would be to do a ballot measure stating either or 3 options. The first one is yes or no. And if the answer is yes, will we stay consistent with the 3-day event in proximity to the 4th of July? Or do we move forward to a bike week, a week either before or after? And then before or after gives us options as well. And again, I think that the critical piece here is it's advisory, and it's all predicated on whether this council has the financial resources to fund the financial needs of the police department, and if the police department can obtain the resources necessary. And so, and that's really something to be determined. So that would be my motion.
Sir, and I would only.
Council, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't believe we're agendized to actually take a vote on anything. It was to provide direction to staff. So I would ask that it be done by consensus.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, real quick.
Go ahead.
Just Peter Lago brought it up, but historically, the Laguna Seca motorcycle race is the weekend after the 4th of July weekend. And I believe their events start on Thursday and Friday for semi biker week in Monterey or Cannery Row. So just keep that in knowing, like, if you're moving things around, you're going to be probably in competition with them.
Well, I that's what I was just going to ask you for. It's not about being in competition, it's about being in partnership. Because I think one of the most important things we can do is to reach out, have that partnership, and that question really saying to the community that, are you in favor of tying in with the bike week in Monterey as a partnership or whatever it is, because that's the key. When you have that flow going back and forth, they don't want it all there all the time. They want to see it move out too. They want that ebb and flow. So we need that together. And so the public understands that it's not, we're just having a bike week. We're partnering with somebody that's already doing it. So it's a smoother ride. And I think that really benefits the entire Central Coast.
There's 1 million registered bikes within 1 day's riding of where we're at.
Yeah.
And at any given time, you could get all of them down here if there were places for them to go and things for them.
Right.
Right. And everybody has varying interests as well. And so one person may want to be interested in, I tell you, if you've never seen the super bikes at Laguna Seca, that will get your heart beating. And so, but for our city clerk, so thank you, Mr. Epperson. I've heard that we're looking for consensus, not a motion. So I'll withdraw the motion that never really existed. And the city clerk, Mr. Epperson, have worked with the firm, the independent counsel to move this forward. And so I presume, based on the conversation that you've heard this morning, that our independent counsel would have the ability to then put together something that would then still have to come back to council for final approval, correct?
Which I could place on June 6th if you'd like, so that we could have that firm for, I believe the deadline to ROV is June 20th. I think we have a meeting that day as well.
June 20th is a holiday for the
June
employees
21st.
of
I'm
Ulster.
sorry, June 21st. Yeah.
So again, that would be my direction if the council supportive of it.
Yeah, so just again, I would say that the main point is to tie in of the Monterey Laguna Seca event, so people understand what this means. It's not like we're trying to create something else. We're just tying in. We're partnering. Hopefully.
And independently, someone could place an argument in favor and maybe state those things.
Thank you. Sir?
Yeah, I just want to go on the record and say that I completely support Councilmember Burns, not his motion, but I'm in agreement. Let's put it on the ballot for an advisory, either yes or no. And if yes, then let's ask the question. I don't know if we have to get into all the specifics. It could be in the argument like you guys stated, but either for a weekend, 4th of July weekend, or a week, either previous week or following week, tied into
the Monterey Laguna Seca.
Yep, and that'll go in
Fire
the measure argument, right? Or the ballot argument. So completely in favor of that.
The argument would have to be done by independent.
I think we have
We
one
can
sitting in the
take care of
audience.
That can happen. Okay. Is that their consensus from council on this? Was that yes from everyone? Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to item 2A2.
Thank you. So this item is the fire district. At the April 18th, 2022 City Council meeting, I was seeking direction to move forward with securing our legal consulting services concerning a fire district. Since then, staff has learned that the new agency process would likely take around a year to complete to provide time for the application process, possibly even 2 years, dependent on how long the process is. There would be a LAFCO analysis, hearings, and then, of course, the possibility of the election. The LAFCO process would likely be initiated by either the City Council or the San Benito County Board of Supervisors. The conclusion of the process would be 2023 or 2024. So this is was requested by council to have it brought back for discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you. So my question for, I guess it'd be the city manager, Mr. Miller, but I've heard up to 2 years to move through this process, and there are several opportunities for it to fail at that point. If A doesn't happen, you can't move forward to B, and throughout the process. And I don't know that we have the time to really address it going through a fire district process, because in my opinion, this is somewhat time sensitive, because the SAFER grant wasn't refunded, and we had I think it was 9 positions that were funded through the SAFER grant. This
Correct.
council has committed, actually, it wasn't this, well, I guess it was this council, but it was driven by the previous council, that if that happened, the city would pick up those costs associated with those firefighters that would not be no longer funded. And as I recall, it was somewhere between 800,000 and $1.2 million.
It's about 1.2 million.
So it's about $1.2 million. So that's where it gets time sensitive to me. And so if we can't move this process forward, maybe we start the process, but perhaps we need to revisit the contract prior to that, because I don't think it's reasonable or appropriate for us to be under or helping the county or the city of San Juan Bautista to pay for their fire services. And so for me, I just want to start the conversation with that, out there, that's my thought. I mean, we probably need to revisit the contract with the county and the city of San Juan Bautista. And if we want to go forward with the fire district, at the end of the day, I think that is probably the very best outcome. But
Yeah, Mayor, my suggestion, because it is probably going to be a 2-year process. I mean, we could get it going forward within a year, but then that would be a special election, which costs the city. I'm sure we'd be the one funding it the most. So like I say, it would be a 2-year process. The council, the county and San Juan Bautista's council has created a fire committee, tasked with the fire chief to get those meetings started. So I think that might be the better location to get the district discussion started, because you really need probably all 3 agencies to join in to have a district that's going to work. The city could kind of start their own district and I don't know, it wouldn't make sense that the council just give the fire service of the city over to just a district that covers the city. So, but a district that serves the whole county, that's a different thing. But
Mr. Perez, you have a comment?
Yeah, you know what, that was exactly my question. So if we, who are we talking to? What about the fire union, with the fire department? What's their opinions and stuff? It's like, you know what, for this just to, I don't know. I'm not seeing a whole lot of sense in this. I think it's refining our process and our contracts to a better understanding and I don't have a good understanding of a clear understanding of this whole situation. So to just abandon it and go to a fire district, I'm going to need more information. So that's where I stand with this. I think that I totally support our police department and our firemen. You guys are, it's so essential. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for what you do for our city. But I don't see all the sense in this, and that's because I don't have all the information for this. And so, you know what, I want to see more information before I come up with any direction.
Yeah, Mayor, to answer that question, I've had the conversation with preliminary conversations with the union. The union president's here. I'm hoping I'm not putting different words in his mouth, but they're open to the idea. But the same thing, that we're so early on with the process. What are the parameters to make sure it works correctly?
Exactly. Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, thanks for the presentation that you sent us. It was very helpful. And there are issues here. There have been issues for a number of years, and that's why we're talking about this. And I think that it's time sensitive now because the SAFER grant ran out. And again, we don't want to lay people off, obviously, but the county, from my understanding, is growing very rapidly, especially from reading your presentation. The growth is what is causing sort of like this not balanced services, right? They're not paying into it. They're growing almost twice as fast now than us. So they're not paying their fair share, and we're providing services to them, especially all the way out in South County. So there are major issues here. I do want to hear from the fire department. Obviously, they're our partners, and this is going to affect them primarily. But I do think that if we all sit down together, we can come up with a reasonable solution. But it's very concerning and very pressing. And this is something that we've been talking about since I first got on the council. And then we had to probably put it in the back burner a little bit because of COVID. So my understanding is there's two options, and I'd like some clarity on this too. And I know I read this late last night, but there's two options, right? So number one, we can create a fire district with the JPA, right? Or you're asking us to form a new agency, which would involve LAFCO. Which one of those two options is going to be the one that's costing 2 years?
The new agency.
Yeah, the new agency would be 2 years.
Okay, so if we were to go the other route with LAFCO,
that's the new agency.
Okay, that's the 2 year. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, we're already going to create a JPA on something else, hopefully. So I think that if we do form a JPA, we can do the other JPA in tandem at the same time with working with the county and Sama Batista, in my opinion. So anyhow, I know it's not on the agenda, but I'd love to hear from the fire department. I'd love to hear from all the council members, and of course, if there's any members of the public. And then I'm pretty confident that we can come out of this with the mutual understanding agreement to benefit all of our citizens here. Thank you.
So let me, a couple of statements. To get to a fire district, we can't do that. That takes a while. The reason it's a conversation is because when a study was done several years back, the study's recommendation was to really make a strong community fire department. It needs to be district-wide and should be the direction was a fire district would make more sense than anything else because the county is so big. And we have the city in San Juan Bautista. The problem we're having right now is, as mentioned by Councilmember Resendez, is there's so much growth going on in the county, and yet no additional funds are coming in from the county to help offset the cost of the services. And this is why I was strongly against the contract that was signed. Look, we have new people at the county. Sam, the overall program has been a major success, and I think we can all agree that what we have now compared to what we had in the past, night and day difference. Very good. What we have to do is get to a point where we don't end up carrying the burden of the county. And by that, I mean, one of the things that really irked me at the time was the CFD fees the county would have to pay in for any new home built was designed so that they would collect it, but they would only use that money to just pay the bill they had, rather than a new home, more money has to go into this account to help provide the services. So as they're continuing to grow, this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, to the point, I can tell you, within 2 to 5 years, it's going to be an absolute nightmare for the city if this is not put into check. One of the conversations back then was, how do we make this fire district fair? And the reality is, you do it pretty simply by saying, by properties. You have so many properties in your city, you have so many properties in your county, every property has to be protected, and there's a cost to it. So you find a fair balance to cover that property across county, cities, and you have your numbers. That way it's fair, and then if there's ever growth in any one area, they're having to pay that portion of it. So it never becomes a burden for the city of Hollister, it never becomes a burden for this county or city of San Juan Bautista. It becomes a partnership across the board where the entire community can feel safe knowing they have the services they need. Otherwise, we're going to run ourselves into as pointed out, we're going to $1.2 million already, and it's going to be much more than that. And I can tell you right now, you cannot lay off firefighters and provide the service we need throughout the county. That would be a whole nother disaster. It's just having the time to sit down with our partners. And we're going to be doing this. Our first meeting is May 19th, Mr. Burns, next Thursday, to have.
I'm sorry, sir, there's a correction. It's May 26th.
May 26th?
Yeah, because they have the forum, the debate forum happening at the same time, and some of those members should be here in this meeting.
So I didn't get the memo on that?
We just sent it out. We refreshed it and sent it out. Yeah, you'll get it, or you should have got it, and it's 10 o'clock on May 26th.
Thank you for that. I would have been sitting here and
He wouldn't have been along.
yeah. He would have had 2 upset council members. So the point is, going back, looking at the study that was done, understanding you have new partners involved, new members, just really getting to a reality standpoint, because even with the services we have now, it doesn't really cover the areas it's supposed to cover correctly. And, that's the issue with growth. There's cost, a lot of cost. And this is why I get so, bothered when I hear sprawl and we're going to build something way over here and it's going to be fantastic for you. Well, who pays the bill? Why does Hollister have to keep paying the bill for all these things, for somebody's grand ideas that just make no sense? So we have to be very aware of that. And people need to understand the further you go down the road, the more cost. When it takes firefighters an hour to drive to a situation in South County, there's a big cost to that. Not only in the labor, but in the equipment being brought out there. So we have to understand this. County needs to realize those old days of wishful thinking are over, and we need to grow up and have that strong partnership. So long story short, we're not going to have this conversation about putting something on the ballot for a fire district right now. That's just impossible. But through the committee, we can move to a JPA, and through the JPA approved success to finally move towards a fire district where all agencies are responsible. Because here's the other major issue. If something happens, the city of Hollister is on the hook. We talked about workers' comp, liability. That is the problem. And I can give you a good example of something, Chief, you probably remember this issue, where there was a brush fire along 156 that jumped the fence to a home. They had a lot of weeds in the home. That caught fire. That spread to the home. And all of a sudden, the city of Hollister's firefighters were the problem. No, we weren't the problem. The problem was certain things weren't being taken care of. But when the disaster hits, all of a sudden it becomes our problem. And the threats of the lawsuits and so on. We have to understand how this works and address this issue all over to prevent these problems, because we are holding the bag on the liability and the workers' comp for disaster, and they're going to come. We all know fire season is year round now, and we can't afford to keep going down the old path. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple final thoughts for me. Again, I think part of the challenge here was we tried to fund something long-term with a short-term funding stream, and that was the SAFER grant. And this hasn't been an issue once, but at least twice that I'm personally aware of. And for me, the SAFER grant is a great thing, but it's not something you can count on being refunded or re-awarded year after year after year. And so, and when I found out the most recent time that the grant wasn't re-awarded, I kind of lost my mind in that regard. And so for me, I like the value of grants, but they're not long-term solutions. And quite candidly, I did a lot of review of previous council meetings of previous councils, and the previous council knew that that was a risk, and that council committed to take and know that that was the case. But things have changed significantly since that council was seated as well. And so for me, we really do need to hold the county, and maybe, I frankly, I lose my mind over the fact that we're paying, I don't know, 40, 50, 60, $70,000 to put our firefighters in a building in San Juan Bautista as well. That to me it just seems inherently flawed. And so, and I don't like the fact that one of our fire divisions out at the airport is in portables. Doesn't make sense to me. I mean, there's a lot of bigger conversations to be held here, and I'm sure that it made sense at the time. I'm not questioning then, but I'm questioning now. And so, this council has committed to keep those firefighters that were at risk of losing their job employed. And as I see that, that's a long-term commitment. Nothing worse in my mind than to be one of those 8, 9, 10 people that are questioning whether they have a job in the future. And so my position is they'll always have a job here as long as they perform well and they want to be here. And this council is also, for the first time ever, went back, and not only because their fire contract with the city, their bargaining contract extended beyond the deadline, this council absolutely not only made them whole, but gave them retroactive pay. First time this has ever happened, as I'm aware, in the city. And so again, I want our firefighters and I want our community to know we're committed to that. And we've just now committed to have that gap funding for these folks. And at the end of the day, if we can't come to terms with the other jurisdictions, regrettably, I mean, I think it would be regrettable, but at the end of the day, I'm focused on the city of Hollister. That's where my commitment is 100%. And I understand there are consequences of that as well if we can't get to that next plateau. But people do need to pay their fair share based on, we can't continue to fund county and other city fire services at our expense. And so I want to move forward, and I just want to put that out there because I think it should frame the context of the negotiations that move forward. And the timing is actually really good in my mind because we're coming up on budget cycle as well. And so we need to move forward aggressively with those other jurisdictions to figure this out, because we don't need our fire department feeling like they're underappreciated or in limbo. And in my mind, whatever the current staffing is, it is. And even if we don't come to agreement with those other jurisdictions and we back out of those deals, the people that are here will still be here, and it won't create any kind of a layoff or a reduction in force. It might slow growth in the department in the future, but the people that are here need to be able to rest assured that they have stability in their employment. And so, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Perez. Oh, I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah,
Go
I'm trying to
ahead,
get your
Ms. Morales.
attention. So I think our responsibility is to the city, our residents and our staff. And so that means, for me, it means that completely funding what needs to be funding based on what is our responsibility. So in order to address the issues that are within their jurisdiction. So one, fully funded. Two is looking at our budget from a big picture perspective, and that means incorporating the total costs associated with the fire department. And that includes prevention as well, because that's a cost saving measure. So that, and prioritizing revenue codes as well. And yes, grants are great, but you have to plan. Again, with everything, you need to plan. And so there are people here that have been a while, so the planning should have taken place. And so again, I think that falls back to the city, to our administration, and to the council. Thirdly, I think, we do have a subcommittee. I'm going to keep looking at folks to be aggressive. And I think we've had conversations about being able to hold those conversations with San Juan and with the county, but that's our responsibility. I think that we need to fund what we need to fund. And so if we need to then go back to the county, go back to San Juan, say, do your part, then that's fine. But we have to, at this point, our priority is the city, our priority, our residents, and again, to our staff, they can't be in limbo because we don't do our part or administration doesn't do their part. I think fourth, any changes or any direction in terms of structure regarding the fire department need to include their administration and the union in partnership. So even if we take anything to the ballot, it needs to be in collaboration and in concert because it's a community issue. They need to be involved because they're going to help lobby or advocate for it. So they need to be included in the planning and throughout the entire process. And then last but not least for me is I really want to hear from our chief. He did a great job in providing information and documents to help this council make decisions. So at least I want to hear his thoughts. And then of course, if the union president also has comments or thoughts, then I would love to hear that because for them to show up and show support, we need to respect their time and their voice as well.
Quick question. So you're having your first meeting the 26th.
Yes, sir.
This is the meeting between all the different agencies, the
Yeah,
local
the fire,
agencies.
the old fire advisory committee. I don't know what you want to call it now, but it's going to be 2 members of each jurisdiction plus the alternate.
Okay, and then so staff is looking for direction whether or not we should hire a legal consultant to go into a fire district, but we haven't even had our first meeting.
Correct.
Okay, can someone?
That was my question on the 18th. And then I believe at the 18th council meeting, council requested that this be brought back to get public input.
So I'm just trying to get a little clarity. Thank you. So we haven't had our first meeting. The past is the past, the future is the future, today is today. We haven't had a meeting about the future of our agencies working together and sharing the cost fairly. But we're going to hire a consultant to do a fire district. Am I understanding this?
No, you're not.
Because so basically we're going to the table and we're bringing in our backup. So explain it to me. Someone, Burns, can you explain it to me?
I can. So we reached out, this council in unison, and asked for different things to happen and move forward in conjunction and in harmony with the next general election. And so we needed to understand what it took to create a fire district and how soon we would need to get it on the ballot if we wanted to hit the deadline of this November. And so that's the information that was asked. And you're right, we need to take input, public comment. And yes, I think Councilmember Morales is on point to the fact that this has been an ongoing need, but you need to also focus on the fact that we've been dealing with COVID for 1.5 years, and it created a lot of challenges and it created other needs that were of a greater and higher priority. And there was some breakdown in communication, which led, I spent hours going back and looking at previous council meetings to understand, because when I said it a few minutes ago, when I found out for the second time that the SAFER grant wasn't funded, and I was led to believe that those firefighters were at risk of being laid off I lost my mind.
Mhm.
And so that triggered me going back to do the research or my due diligence. And yes, it's clear from legal counsel's direction, and I think that we can all agree if we can get to the finish line and create a regional fire district, that's the best possible outcome. But those are words, and there's a real process that has to take place, and it's a 2-year process. So if we don't know what that is, how can we make wise decisions? And we're now triggered by the fact that we have I won't say it's a budget deficit gap of $1.2 million, but we cannot continue to move forward to fund other county and cities' public safety needs at our expense. And so that's the purpose of this meeting today. And ultimately, we can still move forward. But the reality is, we knew from our preliminary meetings with this attorney, this outside counsel, when he said 2 years, we know we're done. That's really not even the focus of this conversation today. That's the grander vision. If the county and San Juan Bautista want to move forward in harmony with us, and you're absolutely right, we do absolutely need to take into account the fire administration, the city administration, and the police, or not the police, the fire unions position or association position on this. But those are conversations that need to have to move forward. But really the conversation today is how do we move forward to deal with the financial crisis crisis is probably too strong of a word, but a financial concern or impact of this $1.2 million that we have committed in closed session to fund and make sure that these people remain whole. And by these people, I'm talking about the firefighters and the administration, because at the end of the day, we're all elected to provide essential services, and cities are required by law to provide essential services. And one of those is fire service. And so we did our due diligence, but the reality was, as new council members, frankly, we were ignorant because we weren't necessarily told when that grant was going to expire. And you can't do follow-up on things you don't know exist. And it's a communication issue. And I'm going to call it a growing pain of a new council versus a previous council and transition. But now that we know, we can't ignore it. But we had to do this. And frankly, I don't think anybody's intent was to overstep the opinions, professional opinions of the fire administration, the city administration, and the firefighters association. And so, and frankly, if somebody else wants to be the council liaison because they think they have more time or are willing to do so, I gladly hand that off if somebody thinks they can do a better job. So
I know it's hard to get an associated cost to this, but is there like a ballpark where we're looking at for this type of services?
I'm not sure what the LAFCO, if there's a cost for LAFCO to go through that process. But as of today, for at least the 2022 election, a ballot measure is $16,000 to $26,000 per measure. And then, of course, there's the fees associated with having an elections consultant create the measure.
So let me just, if I can, just real quick. So everyone understands, a fire district is not created from the city of Hollister. It's created countywide. So it really becomes a countywide vote. So the county would actually place that onto a ballot, but that would take a few years to get down the line. And that's what Mr. Burns is talking about. This is just ability to start having the conversations again, to understand how we got to this point, where we want to go as a partnership or not with our other the other agencies, so we can provide the service that needs to be provided throughout the county, because we are a small community and we need to do this as a partnership. As I said, it's worked very well, but there's holes in this that need to be addressed. And the first step is having the conversations again through the committee, moving towards a JPA where we're all funding the correct amounts, proving that works again, move towards a district, because the best thing that can happen is when there's a committed source of revenue from a district through parcels and so on, where each agency commits those numbers, that makes sure that any growth will address numbers. and there's no more, well, we'll worry about it later. This is kind of what happened here. It's like, well, we'll worry about it later. And later comes around, and later always comes around when times are bad financially. And then we're all stuck saying, oh, now what do we do? We don't ever want to be in these situations as in the past. I can remember starting, you were there was 17 firefighters, and they were planning on laying off, I think, 3 or 4. That's how bad it was. Now we're up 40, 41, but that was just craziness. And we built a good program, but all our partners have to understand there's true cost to this. There's true cost. And you can, all the wishful thinking you want, but if you don't address that issue, you're going to end up with failure in the end. And we can't, this is something we can't accept to happen. And I think, again, I'll say there's more members on the Board of Supervisors now, I think, understand financial matters better. There's definitely our partners at San Juan Bautista, I think, understand things better now. But we just got to have the conversation again and understand the bigger picture, because as I point out, there's more growth coming, which is going to require more stations, and more stations require a lot more money. And I know we talk about, sometimes people say 1.8, but I think the studies in the past have pointed out that if you brought in CAL FIRE, they're going to charge at least 3.5 to 4 million per station for a 3-man outfit. So that's coming. That's right around the corner. And it's a county deal that now is going to be the burden of the city, because there's no additional revenues coming in from the county to pay for it. And that would take us from that 1.2 million up to $5 million in the hole, just because we're not doing our work here. And it's let's recognize the issues, address the issues, solve the issues, commit to them. And we'll never have to have these conversations. These guys will never have to worry, because they know they're needed, and this should not be a political issue. Chief, I think you had some requests.
Yes.
Or I'm sorry, Mr. Resendez had a comment.
I'll
First,
stand
we'll
up.
get to that.
Thank you. So my understanding is we're not talking about putting a fire district. It's going to take on the ballot. It's going to take too long. We're looking at forming a JPA. What's going on here is closely, along with other things, is closely related to leapfrog development or urban sprawl. Okay, the county is growing too fast. The further you grow, then the more of a burden it puts on us as a city, because we need to provide services for these people. Also, our taxpayers are being hit in the pocketbook because we have to fund these services for them. The county is not paying their fair share, and anybody that has a business would not provide that service to them if they weren't, because you're going to bankrupt the city. You're going to bankrupt. We're stewards of the public funds, and we're doing a service for the county and San Juan Bautista, and we're not being compensated fairly. Thankfully, the city's in a good position to not have to lay people off. We never want to go there. We heard the high school come here and talk about what's going on with their issues involving growth. And unfortunately, my employer is not in a good position financially like we are. They had issues with development. They let go of teachers. I know how that feels. I was one of those teachers that was going to be potentially pink slipped. So they had to let people go because they cannot cover the cost of building new schools and staffing them. They used one-time COVID funds to staff them, just like we used our one-time grant to hire new people. But we should never, ever lay off our fire personnel. We shouldn't put ourselves in a position to have to lay off our fire personnel. In fact, we need more fire personnel because of how rapidly we're growing. We need to partner with them and resolve these issues, and we don't want to be in those positions. So I am very hopeful that we will do that. And I'm very glad that we are in a position financially to be able to take our time and do this the right way. So that's my understanding of it. So then my question would be, okay, we're going to form a JPA, hope if that's where we go. But then I had another question. I think I lost it. Hopefully it'll come back to me. I'm sorry. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Chief, go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. And thank you, public, for being here, and those of you who are on duty that have to be here. So I appreciate that. You're absolutely correct. I'm happy and relieved to hear your concern for our firefighters, especially the 9 that we were prospectively going to lose. I mean, they've got lives, they got families, and they're here and they're working. Okay, now I'm going to be selfish and say they have a job to do. And if I lost 9 people, that's 1/3 of my department, and that would have been a struggle for them to run 3-person engines throughout the county, a 2-hour run down to New Idria or Panoche or Piscinas. They have to maintain that continuity of operations because it's, number one, expected of them, from me and each other, and from what the contract says. So speaking on the contract, this is a good opportunity for us to speak to the county, because in the contract, it says, and I may be wrong by the number, but it's a 2-digit number. If the county has growth of 12%, it's time to talk to them and reopen up this contract and say, you need to pay more money. Okay. I think we are at 8%, if I'm not mistaken, but we've got potential growth coming in. We're talking about San Juan, Oaks community, and all the other communities that are popping up. And it's just not, a custom one property home. It's multiple homes. It could be 3 or 4 homes on a parcel. The prevention office is constantly approving plans for development, and it's not just economical development for business and industry. We're looking at high density, low density housing. So each house is going to have 2.5, as the census says, 2.5. So in 2 houses, you got 5 people there. All right, and those are 5 drivers on the road. So now's the time. We're going to have this meeting May 26th at 10 o'clock. It's time for us to talk to them about what it is we need to do as far as solidifying this. And I agree with you, Mayor, on a parcel tax. So coming from Watsonville, we had passed a public safety tax between fire and police within the city for an amount of a half a percent or a half a cent. And it provided, I want to say, like maybe between 4 to 7 million a year. And that right there not only funded what they had and what they had the potential of losing, but it also funded apparatus, more police officers. They've got programs throughout the law enforcement and the fire community, not just operational matters, but a lot of prevention and mitigation matters, which helps us reduce the kind of call volume that we have. A parcel tax, a district tax, something that's going to be community-wide that will lessen the burden of the general funds of all 3 of the jurisdictions. Let those taxes come in and start funding the organization. The thing is, it's going to be a campaign. It's going to be difficult to sell, but I think we can, especially if we did it in Watsonville. And they're a similar community to us, except for they got Pacific Coast Highway running right in the middle of their city. So these talks are very motivating. I hope the staff feels the same way. This is the kind of shot in the arm as a vitamin that we need to continue to do what we're doing, irregardless of the situation. If we're a city entity, if we're a contract, or if we're a district, what's going to happen is the firefighters behind me are going to continue to do what the community expects them to do. Okay, that big red truck, big red engine is going to show up, and they're going to provide service. I'm going to open it up to the union president right now, because I know I'm missing some stuff, and I really shouldn't be speaking on his behalf. He could do a better job than I can do on that.
Thank you. Josh Pizzetta, union president for the Hollister firefighters. I want to first off say thank you guys, and I appreciate for the invite. I got a personal phone call to come here today. So thank you for inviting us to this and have this open communication. I want to first again say that the Hollister Firefighters Union is for forming a district if it's done correctly. There's a lot of moving and working parts to this. 2 years doing my own research in the past, 2 weeks, 2 years, I think is a goal. How realistic that is, I'm not sure. 3 to 5 years is probably more realistic doing my research from other departments that have done this. This is a huge undertaking, but I want the council to know, as well as the county and San Juan Bautista, that we're not opposed to it. We are for it if it's done correctly. If it's done fairly for the entire community that we serve, the entire county, and fairly financially for the stakeholders involved. So if there's any questions for me, please, I'd like to ask them. But again, with the possibility of a meeting happening, we would like a seat at that table. So
I do have a question, and I was smiling back when you were back there because you remember the days that I was talking about. Maybe you can explain the situation we're in at that time compared to where we're at now. And
well, I believe you're talking to, this was before we had any contracts with the
we had
county.
nothing.
Yeah, so this was just the city ran fire department, which even at that time was understaffed per the population and per the demographics of the city. And we're still struggling with that now. We're currently serving the entire county, 1,400 square miles, and we're at the staffing where we should be just for the city population. So, and that's, the 9 square miles. So we have a lot of growth and a lot of development to do, but we're willing to assist with that in any way. And I get it. There's a lot of moving parts and working parts to that as well. So
I guess I was referring to now, the difference now serving community-wide, service has, of course, you're having a hard time keeping up, but the service compared now to what it was is night and day difference.
Oh, absolutely.
And and I heard the conversation, well, some people are gonna be laid off. And I said very clearly, very quickly, nobody can be laid off. That is not an answer.
Yes.
But that's what's frustrating for me personally, knowing several years ago, warning about it, and let's get an answer. Chief, you made a comment about the parcel tax. One of the answers is not so much going out to the public saying, hey, everybody's got to pay a little bit more right now. It's really taking what we have, understanding the cost per parcel and making it fair. So if it's $400, $500 a parcel, that needs to be countywide per agency so we can address it. And more importantly, what that does solve is any future parcels are going to have to pay the correct amount rather than ignore it until it catches up to us, because that's how it lets you plan as an agency ahead. And it lets you kind of give people notice that if you do try to build 1,000 homes over here somewhere or whatever, it's going to require another station. Another station costs so much money.
Exactly.
And we're not going to go over here to take the money. We're going to go right where the problem is to cover the cost of that. So it's better planning is what I'm trying to say. So I'm glad to hear you're willing to have those discussions. And I'm glad to hear this council is willing to address it. And as I said, I believe our partners at the county and San Juan Bautista are willing to face the music now and have that conversation before it becomes a major issue for us. That's the worst time to try to solve a problem, is when you're under the pressure. Best time is up ahead, because we know that recession is coming. And I never want to go through that conversation we went through in 2012 and 13. Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. So actually, I think my question is for the city manager, but Chief, you brought up a public safety sales tax initiative. And I will say that when I worked for the city of Visalia back in the, 2007, 8, 9 era, that we were the first city in the state of California that did that successfully, because it requires a 2/3 vote, as I recall.
Yes.
And so, but Mr. Miller, my understanding is we're pretty much taxed up and out in our
Correct.
sales tax initiative.
Yeah.
What is our capacity? And then maybe the follow-up question would be, if we couldn't push it forward, maybe there's capacity with the county. And the reason I say this is I have personally seen the benefits of that, where every year we would line up 5 or 6 new police officers in their bright, shiny police cars. Nobody knew that they were going to get all the junk cars, but we still got the new cars, and we got all the resources we needed. And we built 2 new police substations in Visalia, smart buildings, hay building or straw buildings. And then we built a state-of-the-art fire training facility in Visalia. That was a regional training facility that people came to. So there is absolutely a benefit to it. And it is a heavy lift, but when you market it correctly and share with the community the value to that. And again, I couldn't agree more with our fire association president that, I agree to create a fire district in 2 years is very aggressive and probably not realistic. But in the meantime, to pursue it as if it's done fair and right with all the parties at stake involved is absolutely correct. But maybe to pursue with the county a public safety tax initiative, and maybe even with the city of San Juan Bautista. I don't know, but it may be bigger than that because I think we're capped out more or less.
Yeah, correct. Between the city's transaction tax of 1% and then Measure G with a COG, that has maxed this out. But there are parameters where you can petition the state for additional amount. I know the county has room, 1% available. I believe there are talks about them going out for a 1% sales tax, potentially this upcoming election. But yeah, we can look at that parameters to do a special tax. So it does require 2/3 plus 1 to pass. So that's we can look at that.
I think that would be a great idea. Go ahead, Chief. I didn't mean to speak over you.
No. So to agree with that, if we do ask for any kind of adjustment from the state, right now we're being deemed as the second largest community in the state, the ninth in the nation, and the fastest growing since this year in California. So I mean, with those qualifications, I'm going to say, but it's a deficit to us. I think that gives us justification to ask the state, hey, look, you know what, we are maxed out in taxes, but this is what we're facing, and we need to address this for the community. And it won't be just a fire tax. We'll even let law enforcement in on it. So
well, let me step back. Actually, we have 0.25 left before we're maxed out. But you know, the county, and I think one of the frustrations I had in the past was when the city decided to go again for the 1%, the county bailed and said, basically, why? You guys are basically paying for all our costs. I said, no, you need that money to pay your fair share of fire services and police and all these different things. And it was like, no, we're good. The county has room, and the county needs to do their part. And what they really need to do is put it on as public safety, that 1%, so it stays there. They don't take that money and go run off and spend it somewhere else, because they got a lot of catching up to do. That will solve that problem. And again, as a partnership, I've ran these numbers many of times, and I've said them many a times. We could actually do much better than what we're doing right now, just by being fair with how the numbers are spread throughout the community and acknowledging the true cost. So we could do that, but it's important to get to that point, as you're pointing out later down the road, to the other additional funds to get it to that next level. So first step is making sure we never get ourselves in a situation where we're talking about layoffs. And I think we're going to be okay for a while. And again, I think the county and San Juan Bautista are willing to have the conversation. But we do have another 0.25 that can be added onto it. There's many communities that are at a point above us, a whole point. So we can get there. But what I don't want to do is have the public panic and say, oh my God, they're just trying to tax us and all that. This is more of a conversation of being fair and allocating dollars throughout from agencies, and not one just saying, well, you have more money than us. Well, we put that 1% tax to make sure we're covering our costs. You decided not to. Now we're covering your costs. That doesn't work. So we'll get there. And that's why I'm looking forward to having these meetings, Mr. Burns, and shredding the numbers. Mr. Resendez.
Thank you. It came back to me. So I think the simple answer, I'm not in favor of exploring tax right now. Again, I think the simple answer is we need to form a joint power association, something a little bit more formal than what we have now. They need to pay their fair share. San Juan Bautista needs to pay their fair share. I like the idea of the template or the formula moving forward so that it's sustainable. And yeah, I think that's the easy answer here from what I'm understanding. And I would very much like to move forward in that direction aggressively. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
I agree. But I also think that this is a time to have the conversation, and maybe it begins with the fire committee or chief, whatever we're going to call it, to commit to move forward to start the heavy lifting to create the fire district as well, knowing it's at minimum 2 years out. And one of the we need to commit to this today or in the near future, because there's a high probability that none of us are going to be on this dais then. And part of what happens historically in this city, with the exception of the mayor, is there's a routine turnover. There's nobody on this council right now that was here 3 years ago. Well, maybe Mr. Resendez barely. Well, all right. Nobody been here 4 years. Fair statement? Right. And so when you have a reoccurring turnover, priorities shift, priorities change, agendas change, personal agendas change. But at the end of the day, the fire department remains the same. So we need to commit to the process. And Vice Mayor Perez, perhaps you're correct. Maybe we need to wait until we engage. But I pretty much heard both the chief and the president say they support it if it's done right and if the right people are at the table. And so I think that this council could give consensus to the city clerk and the city manager as it relates to engaging that private or that independent counsel to help us, to give us the direction how to move forward with the steps, because this is not a simple process, and it could be turned upside down real quick. And so we do need subject matter expertise. And as I recall, from the independent counsel, this isn't his first rodeo in doing this kind of thing. And it wouldn't be appropriate to put that responsibility or burden on our city attorney. And so city manager, city clerk, do you need direction in regards to this now, or is this something that we need to wait for? I don't see a reason to wait, frankly, because I've heard it from the two speakers that they support it. And that would be the only reason in my mind we would hit pause on this.
Yeah, I'm willing to go move forward.
Yeah, I believe we have consensus to contract with BB&K to kind of give us the roadmap that we need to start following.
That would be correct. And I think you're absolutely right. If we don't get on the right path, we're going to be all over the place again, and we'll never get there. So, absolutely right. If we get there in 2 years, that would be very aggressive. If we get there in 4 years, but we do it right, that's just perfectly fine too. We got to do it right.
And if I can add, coming from Santa Cruz County, I saw Aptos merge into Santa Cruz Central. The talks started in 2014 and they were solidified in 2021. So it took 7 years. Monterey Regional took 5 years. And then Monterey Regional Airport and Monterey City took 4. So it takes a considerable amount of time. And from what I understand, everybody was on board. Everybody from the union to SEIU that supported it. So we'll do our best.
If I can add to that as well, we are in a very unique situation here. Normally, districts are formed for the fact of, let's say, San Juan Bautista had their own fire department. Trespino City had their fire department, Hollister City, and San Benito County. There was 4 different fire departments. The reasons districts are formed is to grab all those and make them one operational. We are already one operational group. We run in the entire community here of San Benito County. Who needs to come together is the admin, all the stakeholders, the county, San Juan Bautista, and Hollister City. So, yeah. So we're in a kind of a different, unique situation that we're already ran. Our training is all the same. Our policies and procedures are all the same. We're not grabbing any other groups. We just need the admin to come together and form that one, and which funding as well.
And you're absolutely right. And the structure, as you're pointing out, is already there. And I'll go back to when we first formed this understanding amongst the agencies. We did it all within a year, which at the time was, people felt it was just not going to happen, but we did it by working together. So the structure is there. It's just the understanding of how to finance it, how to plan for the future. So we're all in agreement and recognize this issue is not going away, but the service has to be done right. And that's really the conversation. So I think we can get there. I agree with Mr. Burns, and we have that information, or the roadmap, as you're pointing out, City Manager, the roadmap is going to keep us going. What are the steps? let's agree that we need this, and then give everybody time to figure out how to pay their fair share. And then we can move to the next steps. And I think that will be a great time in the history of this community. So if there's no, there is.
One final thought for the city manager and our fire chief. I would like to see if the county has an interest in a public safety sales tax initiative where it would be earmarked. And in this case, I think it's even a bigger conversation because it wouldn't necessarily only be our police department and our fire department that could benefit, but the sheriff's office as well. I mean, they're part of the bigger picture. And so I'm 100% convinced that it could happen. It requires a lot of additional work, but I think there's a definite benefit to it. I've seen it personally. I've seen it locally. I know that we did. I don't remember the measure it was, but I believe our police department and our parks department benefited from that campaign. And I know they have a tendency to sunset either at 5 or 10 years, as I recall, but that would be a good starting point. And I would like to see if maybe there's capacity to bump ours up. And I'm not, again, for the community, I'm not suggesting increasing taxes without a sound basis. And I guarantee you, when I was in Visalia, we purposely rolled out the new firefighters, the new police officers, the new police cars, the new fire station, the new PDs to show people that we were actually putting our money where our mouth was and the physical results of that. And then we would talk about the additional 5 cops we hired every year, what they actually did, how many arrests they made, how many citations they issued, how much public outreach they did. Same thing with our fire department and the personnel there, the true value people get, because I do believe the community has a willingness and an appetite to support public safety unilaterally. But I also believe when they see the real value to that added resource, because at the end of the day, the county is limited. The city of San Juan Bautista is limited, and certainly we are as well. And it would be nice to know clearly what our options and alternatives are on that level as well. And maybe they run a parallel course, or maybe we find it's not practical or possible, but then it makes us look at other options. So I'd like to hope that the council would be supportive of that as well.
Yeah, I can talk with the CAO about that. That's not a problem. And I'm sure Chris will also talk to the CAO.
You got a speaker card?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Chris Mangiano.
Good morning. I'm Chris Mangiano with the Office of Emergency Services. I also oversee EMS. EMS currently has a $20 per parcel charge that we receive for to subsidize our 911 contract. So we would be interested in exploring an additional safety, public safety tax. We've discussed that for a while, but haven't moved forward. But what I wanted to talk about is in 2017, excuse me, the county and 2 cities participated in a fire protection and life safety feasibility study. The information isn't current, but the formulas are of value, and the options are detailed and lay out information as far as a JPA and a district that I think you may find helpful. But the county, we are committed. We our number one partner, or I shouldn't say number one, the partner we work the closest with is Hollister Fire. I've been with the county long enough when fire was handled by CAL FIRE in the county. So we see a strong benefit working with Hollister Fire, and I think it's a benefit to everybody. So I'm here to help if I can.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. So I think the direction was, again, we need the services to put us in the right path. There's consensus on that. Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.